These are some of the most disturbing crimes in the GTA community, and as the video goes on, they go from mild violations to atrocious felonies. It was November 23rd, 2023, Thanksgiving evening. 65-year-old Ned Armstrong Luke, known for his iconic role as Michael DeSanta in GTA 5, was streaming and playing the game that made him famous when the call came in, and it's not the good kind.
Hello? There what?
He was told that heavily armed police officers were outside and they had his house surrounded. Now he calmly ended the call, said goodbye to viewers, and went out to face the music.
Alright, I'll be out there. Alright, I gotta go.
But before the police officers with AR-15s and snipers arrived at his doorstep, Ned was just a voice actor, getting roles like Raffles in the 1991 animated comedy Rover Dangerfield, and even being on commercials for Budweiser and Burger King. He had not done any work in the gaming niche until Rockstar, a video game publisher, came calling with the GTA 5 casting, and taking this job would be the best decision of his professional career, but it would affect his personal life in ways he could never expect. On September 17, 2013, GTA 5 launched, and it instantly became Rockstar's biggest game ever, selling 225 million copies and making over $10 billion. People loved Ned's character, Michael, and so he instantly became a celebrity and one of the most well-known names in gaming. He would leverage his fame to build a streaming career where he gained 410,000 subscribers on YouTube and over 31,000 subscribers on Twitch. When he streamed, he regularly played GTA Online and participated in GTA Roleplay, a community-run mod that allowed more customizations and let players act out their fantasies in the game's fictional city of Los Santos. Now this gave the Grand Theft community the chance to directly interact with the man behind one of their favorite video game characters. And for a while things were good, but soon this would change. It was only a matter of time before online trolls noticed Ned. Trolls will harass pretty much anyone, but streamers are their favorite targets since there's an audience watching, so there's usually a bigger reaction. Now they infiltrated Ned's lobbies and made playing absolutely unbearable for him.
Oh man, that pisses me off right there.
At first, Ned could handle them by himself. It wasn't his first time on the internet, and he probably already expected some troublemakers. But what he didn't expect was the sheer amount of disruption aimed directly at him. It seemed like the more he banned toxic players, the more they sought him out. And during one GTA roleplay stream in February of 2024, trolls chased him around screaming so many obscenities at him that he just gave up and ended the stream.
Don't be disrespectful to Ned. First of all, you're not disrespectful. You're not disrespectful to Ned.
However, things would get even more serious when the trolls would discover a far more effective way to attack it, by moving things from the internet to real life. It turns out that at some point in time, Ned's home address had been leaked. This would start a new wave of harassment for him and his family, starting off with small things like sending pizzas he never ordered to his home.
So...
The guy's back at our front door.
Alright. Yep. Alright. I'll be there in a minute.
Ned knew that the pizza orders were essentially saying that trolls knew where he lived, and if he didn't do something soon, something more sinister might be sent to his door. Now fast forward to the police surrounding Ned's house that Thanksgiving evening in 2023. The police officers have their guns trained in on Ned's home, watching for movement as they prepare to breach. But the thing was, Ned hadn't actually committed any crime here. This whole thing was set up by the trolls. You see, they realized that if they wanted to go big and hurt Ned, there was no better way to achieve this than swatting his home. If you don't know what swatting is, it's when someone falsely reports a serious crime like violent assault or domestic terrorism to the police and have them raid your home with a SWAT team. And since SWAT operations are usually very intense situations, there's a likelihood of something going wrong. Now the trolls not only know this, they expect things to escalate and get violent. Unfortunately for them, Ned calmly ended the stream, went to meet the police officers and explained the situation to them.
Alright, I'll be out there. Alright, I gotta go. Now these have swatted my house, so I've gotta go. Alright, have a good one.
And a day later, Ned would go online and post, "I was hoping this would stay quiet, but let me address it. Everyone is fine. Thanks for your concern. This is the 6th time we've been swatted." Now fans were shocked to hear just how many times this has happened, but Ned made it clear that he was choosing not to be bothered by the constant harassment. "Guys like this, I've known them all my life. They exist to annoy, irritate, and infuriate. If you let them, I don't let them." Now Ned's words may be comforting, but they don't eliminate the threat he faced. Swatting has turned deadly before, just like in the case of Andrew Finch. Andrew was a 28-year-old father of 2 who on December 28, 2017 was swatted after 2 Call of Duty players, 18-year-old Casey Viner and 19-year-old Shane Gaskill, got into an argument. Shane had dared Casey to swat his home and given him a false address in Wichita, Kansas. Now this address belonged to Andrew, who was completely uninvolved in the dispute. Casey then got 25-year-old Tyler Barris, who made a hobby out of swatting, to make the call. That evening, heavily armed police officers surrounded Andrew's home, and he was shot by Wichita PD officer Justin Rapp with a sniper rifle as he walked out. He didn't survive. Now Tyler and Cassie would end up being arrested not long after, and during his trial in 2019, Tyler would say, "If I could take it back, I would, but there's nothing I can do. I am so sorry for that." Also in his trial in 2019, Cassie apologized for his actions, saying, "I never intended for anything to happen. I think of it every day." Now they would be convicted and sentenced to prison for their crimes. Tyler to 20 years and Cassie to 15 months. But even with the knowledge of how dangerous their actions are, trolls continued to harass Ned, setting up SWAT attack after SWAT attack. And the worst part, Ned's life wasn't the only one at risk. His family was too. Ned is married to actress Amy Sachs, and together they have a son, Max. And every time the police were called to his home, they also risked getting hurt, or worse. Now fans blame Rockstar for refusing to adequately protect Ned, claiming that GTA has weak security measures in place that allow hackers and trolls to gain access to the IP addresses of players. They believe that this was how the trolls discovered Ned's address. According to one fan, Rockstar failing to hide people's IP addresses from modders could have resulted in one of the lead actors for GTA getting shot and killed. However, Ned would come to the defense of Rockstar, posting on X on November 24, 2023, the day after the Thanksgiving incident. "This had nothing to do with Rockstar. These leaked my private info years ago and have been doing this since. Anyone's info is available online if you're sick enough to really want to find it." Now after the incident, Ned continued to follow his principle of ignoring toxic interactions online and in person. But this clearly wasn't effective, as he's been swatted 2 more times since then. By then, the local police seemed to have figured out the pattern, but they still had to treat every emergency call as credible. If they ever choose to ignore a call that turned out to be real, things could get very bad for everyone. Still, they know that when they get called to Ned's home, it's likely another false alarm. And this was the case on December 23, 2023, 5 weeks after the Thanksgiving attack, when police officers casually walked in on Ned while he was streaming.
Getting swatted again. 2 years.
Oh my god. What's up, guys?
How you doing?
Hang on a second, Rob. Hang on. You guys say Merry Christmas to my friends.
Merry
What's
Christmas.
going on, man? How you doing?
At the time, he was streaming GTA Online with Rob Weedhoff, the voice actor for John Marston in Red Dead Redemption.
We got Rob Weedoff on here too. He's the guy who plays John Marston in Red Dead Redemption series.
Oh,
really? Yeah.
But unknown to the trolls, Ned had also been working with federal prosecutors in the background, and on December 27, 2025, he posted a photo on Facebook of a Department of Justice notice telling him, "I am contacting you because you were identified by law enforcement as a victim during the investigation of the above criminal case. The sentencing hearing for the defendant has been set for January 27, 2026, 10 AM. You're welcome to attend this proceeding." This turned out to be the sentencing of one of the trolls that had swatted Ned during the Thanksgiving 2023 livestream, and Ned's caption on the post was brief yet direct. "Mess around and find out. Many more names discovered and provided." However, no news about the sentencing was made public. Even Ned himself blocked the name of the defendant when he posted the court's letter to him, so the swatter's identity and anyone else linked to them was kept anonymous. Still, this story is far from over, as Ned continues to face harassment online. But while this case hasn't had anyone seriously hurt just yet, the next case had higher stakes, and this time the cops were right to bring it all down. This is Christopher Anderson, a software programmer based in Melbourne, Australia, and in 2018 he led a team of 4 other coders to make Infamous, a GTA 5 third-party program that claimed to offer professional-grade gaming modifications. But months after the program launched, a team of law enforcement forensic experts and lawyers raided his home. This was because Chris and his team were part of one of the most toxic and criminal parts of online gaming. It all started back on October 1st, 2013, when exactly 2 weeks after the release of their single-player title, GTA 5, Rockstar Games launched GTA Online on the PlayStation 3 and on Xbox 360. It allowed multiplayer gameplay and customization, as well as a steady stream of new missions and heists. It was instantly a hit within the community, as it allowed friends to play and explore Los Santos together. Rockstar also added a microtransaction system based on items known as shark cards that allows players to claim in-game currency. This system brings in about $500 million in revenue for Rockstar every year. However, there was a problem. GTA 5 as well as GTA Online were only available on consoles, and the entire PC community community was left out completely, and for Rockstar this was an untapped market. So on April 14, 2015, Rockstar released a PC port for the game, finally allowing the PC gaming community to have their taste of GTA Online. But there was an issue that Rockstar did not account for, and Chris and his team saw it as an opportunity. You see, the PC gaming community is well known for modding and altering just about any game they can get their hands on, and Chris' team realized that there was a lot of money to be made if they could provide a mod for GTA Online. And so for 3 years, they reverse engineered GTA 5's copyrighted code and found ways to inject their own code while bypassing the game's anti-cheat system. Then in early 2018, they launched Infamous, sold it through infamouscheats.cc, and charged between 40 to 60 Australian dollars at the time. Now over the years, this has gone to over 70 Australian dollars, or about 50 US dollars. The program came with lifetime access and a host of options including unlimited money, God mode, invincibility, teleportation, and the ability to access any vehicle and weapon, amongst other things. The mod became viral overnight, and soon GTA Online lobbies were filled with players running around with gear that they shouldn't have, and so much money it broke the in-game economy. Now this ruined the experience for a lot of players, who had to play alongside cheaters who often disrupted their lobbies. But there was something else that Infamous did that got them the wrong kind of attention, messing with Rockstar's cash flow. You see, a lot of people realized that they wouldn't need to spend any money buying shark cards from the game store if they could just cheat their way into getting everything they want. So the more players used Infamous, the less Rockstar made in revenue, and soon they figured out what was going on, and they weren't pleased at all. Just months after Infamous went live, Rockstar tracked down the developers of Infamous. Along with Chris, they identified Sarah Stesser, Kurosh Anderson, Kurosh Jedian, and another developer simply known as Sphincter. Rockstar then hired Bird & Bird, an international intellectual property law firm, who sent the devs a cease and desist order, prompting Chris and his team to shut the Infamous cheat site down. However, this wasn't good enough for Rockstar. They tracked Chris and his associates' properties, and on September 21st, 2018, they got a no-knock order from the Federal Court of Australia. This order allowed law enforcement to breach homes unannounced, so they raided Chris's home as well as the shared home of both Kurosh's. They took everything, including hard drives and computers. They could be regarded as evidence, but even this wasn't enough. The thing is, Rockstar is a $22 billion company, and when they hit hard. They decided that the one place they could hit Chris was where he had hit him before, financially. They froze all of Chris's accounts. His PayPal accounts, cryptocurrency wallets, and bank accounts were all locked out. He was left with a barely livable monthly allowance, while the cases against him and his team were being determined by the courts. And later he would say in an interview with reporters, "They're just beating up on me." Now the GTA community was conflicted about Rockstar's actions. Some saw it as excessive and unfair. One user posted on Reddit, "This seems to be kind of scary if you think about it, like a dystopian movie. Isn't this something that the police are supposed to do, not companies?" And another one posted, "Make it so that I don't have to grind 40 hours to buy a car, and maybe I won't have to look for the guy dumping cash from a helicopter." On the other hand, there were players who came to the defense of Rockstar. License agreements aside, that's true up until the software you're modifying affects the software that other people have paid for in ways they don't approve of. If you want to modify your single-player game, go ahead. If you want to spawn into a server in a multiplayer game and repeatedly everyone by spawning explosions at their feet, preventing them from playing the game, then you're disrupting their ability to use software that they paid for. That's not semantics. And for 3 years the lawsuit went on, but Chris didn't really take it seriously and missed multiple filing deadlines, and eventually the court got tired of his actions, and on August 27, 2021 ruled in favor of Rockstar, saying that Chris and his team had violated copyrights, breached GTA Online terms of service, and violated Australian consumer law. Now this was crushing for Chris, who still hadn't recovered from the raid on his home and the seizure of his assets. However, he and Rockstar continued to negotiate for over a year, and on November 4th, 2022, he agreed to pay 140,000 Australian dollars, or about 99,000 US dollars, to resolve the claims. Since then, he and his team have been off the radar. Copies of his software are still available from shady sites online, but given his experience with Rockstar, it's unlikely that he's involved in their distribution. But as bad as Chris and his team had it, at least he was punished with a fine, unlike the perpetrator in the next case, who wasn't so lucky.
2022, the biggest video game leak ever hit the internet. 90 clips of GTA 6, one of the most anticipated games in history, suddenly appeared online.
On September 22nd, 2022, at approximately 8:30 in the evening, FBI and British cybercrime agents broke into room 15 of a Travelodge hotel just outside Oxford. Their target, 17-year-old Arian Kortash, a brilliant hacker with severe autism spectrum disorder. Arian didn't resist and calmly allowed himself to be taken, almost like he was expecting them. This was not his first run-in with law enforcement, but this time he was not just facing the law, he was also facing Rockstar Games, and they wanted blood. Before Arion was Rockstar's public enemy number 1, he was already infamous on the internet. Back in 2016, when he was just 11 years old, Arion got tired of constantly losing player versus player battles on Minecraft, so he did what many gamers with a grudge and too much free time would do. He figured out how to cheat. And this was the start of a career of hacking and blackmail that would go on to affect some of the biggest companies on the planet. Over the years, he learned how to get account data from compromised databases, and with his skills in SIM swapping, which allowed him to get two-factor authentication codes, he'd gain full access into crypto wallets and bank accounts, and then clear them out. By 2020, at just 15 or 16 years old, he'd managed to gain over just 300 bitcoins, worth about $27 million at the time. That kind of money should have put him on every agency's radar, but he managed to keep a low profile and avoid any scrutiny. But that changed when Arion started attacking corporations, switching his status from being an anonymous hacker to an international fugitive. In August of 2019, he formed Infinity Recursion, a small hacking group mostly made of young Brazilian hackers targeting smaller companies. They dissolved just about 2 years later, in August 2021, due to internal disagreements. Now, around the same year, Arion founded Lapsus. This was Arion's introduction into the big leagues. Their first major target was the Brazilian Ministry of Health. On December 9th and 10th, 2021, the group collected and then deleted 50 terabytes of data from the ministry's website, leaving a note on the homepage for the Brazilian government saying, "You've suffered a ransomware attack. The internal data from the systems has been copied and excluded. 50 terabytes of data is in our hands. Contact us if you want to retrieve the data." Over the next years, Lapsus attacked multiple major tech companies. First they hit Okta, a cybersecurity firm, in January of 2022. Then they hit Nvidia a month later. March 2022 was their most active month, as they attacked Samsung, Mercado Libre, Ubisoft, and even Microsoft. They even tried to hack into the FBI and the US Department of Defense, but they weren't successful with those attempts. Each time the MO was the same. They'd find a way into their systems, steal important data like source codes or employee info, and attempt to extort the companies, hoping that they'd be desperate enough to meet their demands to avoid the data leaking. The demands typically looked something like this. "We are Lapsus. Remember our name. We have your user data. Pay us $4 million in XMR before the 20th of August, or we will delete everything from our servers." But Lapsus' activities had put a target on their back, and this would lead to their downfall. On March 24th, 2022, London police arrested Arion and 6 other members of Lapsus. And on April 1st, they charged them with multiple counts of cybercrime. But because he wasn't of age yet, Arion couldn't just be shipped off to prison. Instead, he was bailed and placed under house arrest in a travel lodge room. His laptop was seized, and he was put on an internet ban and was under constant surveillance. But in just a few months, the police would realize how weak this arrangement actually was, as Arion would go on to commit the most daring hacks of his career. On September 15, 2022, Lapsus hacked into transportation tech company Uber, stealing internal tools and source codes. And just 3 days later, on September 18, Rockstar Games was also hacked, and this time Arion did it all by himself. He collected only 3 gigabytes of data, but what was important about it wasn't the file size, it was what he'd stolen. Since the release of GTA 5 in 2013, fans had been waiting for a new release in the franchise. In February of 2022, almost a decade later, Rockstar announced that a new game, GTA 6, was in development, but they refused to say more than that. And this led to a massive scale of speculation by fans and game enthusiasts about what the new game would look like. So when Arion hacked into Rockstar's systems, he targeted the GTA 6 files. He copied 90 early development clips of the game, and some development files as well. And for good measure, he also copied some of GTA 5's source code. The plan was the same as always, extort Rockstar. However, to prove that he's serious, he decided to do something drastic. Arion logged onto GTA Forums, a site dedicated to discussions about GTA games, under the username TPodUberHacker, and released some of the GTA 6 clips. He also attached an ultimatum to the leaks. "Hi, here are 90 footage/clips from GTA 6. It's possible I could leak more data soon. GTA 5 and 6 source code and assets. GTA 6 testing build." Now at first people online were skeptical, but after Rockstar themselves confirmed the hack a day later, the internet exploded and the clip went viral. So when the federal agents burst into room 15 4 days later, Arion knew the jig was up. The officers searched the room, and what they found was even more shocking. Arion had carried out the attack with just a cell phone, the hotel's TV, and an Amazon Fire Stick, which converts TVs into smart TVs. One of the greatest hacks in the gaming world. It was done with a TV.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Now as news of Arion's arrest started to make waves online, people discussed the hack and Arion's fate. Tons of stuff has been leaked now. He's screwed, or so we think. He's definitely young, but he won't be jailed. Just another slap on the wrist. After looking up who this hacking group is, I honestly don't feel bad for him. But some people came to his defense. At the very least, you could say he's more clued up than the Rockstar team were about their own lack of security. He also managed to do what everyone else couldn't so far. It would have been better for him to expose the breach and perhaps get a reward for it, but oh well. In 2023, Arian was charged with the numerous cybercrimes he'd committed. Because of his severe autism, he couldn't enter a plea, and so the court had to figure out whether he was legally liable for his actions. And on August 23rd, 2023, it was determined that he was. However, because of his mental health needs, the court sentenced him to be held in Guild Lodge, a secure health facility, until he's no longer considered a threat to the public. Now, Lapsus was also found liable and had to pay $10 million to their victims. $5 million of that settlement was to Rockstar alone. Now, despite this, Arian managed to get the last word. As he was being taken into custody, he promised to resume hacking the moment he gets out. Now, while Arian may finally be locked up for his crimes, he didn't go nearly as far as these next teenagers did when they decided to act out their fantasies in the real world.
Grand Theft Auto isn't just a video game anymore. Police say that for 6 Long Island teens, it was inspiration for a violent crime spree. Police say the teens admitted they were copying a character in the video game.
GTA 4, Rockstar's 2008 installment to the franchise, is known for its dark themes and gritty settings. This has caused it to have a dedicated and niche fanbase online. But in June 2008, 6 teenagers gave a different meaning to the term cult following when they decided to act like characters straight out of the game, and it became one of the most outrageous teenage crime sprees of all time. It all started 3 months earlier, on April 29, 2008, when GTA 4 was released. It was set in Liberty City, a fictional place based on New York City. The game followed the story of Nico Bellic, an Eastern European immigrant who traveled to Liberty City to fix some wrongs and make a new life for himself. It was critically well received, even getting an impressive 98 out of 100 score on Metacritic. However, it wasn't all roses for the game, as there were some people, especially parents, who believed that the game was too violent and encouraged all sorts of vices. According to one parent, GTA is terribly unsuitable for the under 18s. It presents a depraved, cynical worldview where anything goes. The main characters are terrible people with few redeeming qualities, brutal gangsters. You spend most of your time killing people for fun and profit. In fact, safety advocates like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving also condemned the game for allowing Nico to drive while drunk, saying, "Drunk driving is not a game, and it is not a joke, it's a choice, a violent crime, and it is also 100% preventable." And this wasn't the first time GTA had been accused of promoting violence and unacceptable actions. In fact, studies have been done to figure out if games like GTA promote violence in children, and while the data proves that it doesn't, the actions of New Hyde Park 6 certainly made parents all over the world think otherwise. On June 24, 2008, 4 students of New Hyde Park Memorial High School in New York gathered at the local park. These students were 15-year-old Brandon Cruz, 14-year-old Gurnur Singh, 16-year-old Samuel Phillip, and 17-year-old Jaspreet Singh. They were bored and looking for something exciting to do, so they decided that committing crimes GTA style was the way to go, and this would be the worst decision of their lives. First, the teens broke into nearby garages and even a garden shed to loot them for weapons. They got a baseball bat, a crowbar, and a broomstick. Next, they found a target. This happened to be a 47-year-old supermarket employee whom we'll call Mike, waiting at a bus stop on Jericho Turnpike. The teens brutally attacked Mike, pushing him to the ground and kicking and punching him repeatedly. They also beat Mike so hard with the weapons they'd stolen that they knocked out several of his teeth, but they weren't done yet. Robbery was also on the memo, as the teens stole Mike's cash, cell phone, and other valuables they found on it. And as they did this, they yelled popular phrases from GTA 4, and after this, they went home. But this would not be the end of their rampage. In fact, the next time, their numbers and the scale of their attacks would be even bigger. The day after the first attack, the boys hit the streets again, looking for some more trouble. And as they plotted their next plans, they met a few other kids they knew from school and tried pulling them in. 18-year-old Stephen Attard and 17-year-old Dylan Laird joined them. They then walked towards Garden Park when they set up a roadblock on Stewart Avenue by standing shoulder to shoulder. There's only one thing on their mind. The teens want to steal a car right off the road. Now, the 6 teens surrounded a 2008 BMW owned by a 23-year-old woman who we'll call Beth. They stole her cigarettes and also attempted to steal her car, but she panicked and drove off, calling the police as she did. But the teens weren't about to give up and continued trying to steal. And when they weren't successful, they swung with their bat at the passing vehicles. Now eventually the Garden Park police, who Beth had called earlier, showed up and arrested the teens, putting an end to the criminal run. But before the teens could be charged for their crimes, the police needed to figure out their motive. And this is where Detective Lieutenant Raymond Coate, who worked for the Nassau County Police Department, came into the picture. When he questioned the boys, they plainly told him that they had robbed, assaulted, and destroyed private property because they wanted to act out their GTA 4 fantasies. Raymond would later say, "They decided they were going to go out to commit robberies and emulate the lead character, Nico Bellic, in the particularly violent video game Grand Theft Auto. These teens have difficulty separating fact from fiction, fantasy from reality. It was quite alarming." And when Rockstar got wind of the news, they released a statement saying, "Events such as these are troubling to all concerned citizens. It would be wrong, however, to link unfortunate incidents like these with any kind of entertainment products. Individuals who commit crimes need to be held accountable for their actions." Given the teens' confessions, it wasn't hard to prosecute them for their crimes. All except Stephen, who was 18, were charged with assault and robbery as juveniles. Later that year, they were found guilty, but none of them saw inside of a jail cell, just probation and community service. However, this would not be the last encounter the teens would have with the law. In 2011, Dylan, now 19, was arrested for using counterfeit money in Framingham, Massachusetts. A year later, a 21-year-old Stephen was also arrested in Framingham, this time during a meth drug bust, though the charges were dropped in 2013. Now over the years, the new Hyde Park 6 have become infamous for their 2-day-long crime spree. But the teens you're about to see next are what you get when you mix bad decisions with an unhealthy obsession with the game. It was a cool night in September of 2013 in a BP service station in Mount Barker, South Australia. It was 1 AM and at this time the station was all but empty except for one staff member running the station. This was when 3 teenagers, Christian Alan Scott and his 2 accomplices, walked in. Now Christian's accomplices weren't of age yet, so their names weren't made public, but for this video we'll call them Trevor and Mike. And in the next few minutes, this trio would do something that'll haunt them for a long time. Now Mount Barker is a small city of about 25,000 residents just 20 miles away from Adelaide. But rather than explore the city or go to parties, Christian's favorite pastimes were a little unusual. He was a heavy drinker and an avid gamer. And that September night, he and his friends had been playing GTA as they drank and smoked weed. In their drunken state, they decided that rather than just playing the game, they could live it out. And so they decided to rob the closest convenience store they could find. Now at the time, Australia had an issue with convenience store robberies. In fact, according to Australia's National Armed Robbery Monitoring Program, 1 out of every 10 armed robbery attacks was of service stations. Christian and his friends were ready to add to that statistic, and their target was the BP service station that I mentioned. Now Trevor walked into the store first, brandishing a knife. He made a beeline for the operator, threatening him, and when he felt that the operator wasn't cooperative, he slashed at him, cutting his forearm and leaving him bleeding. Christian also joined in on the assault, demanding cash and other valuables, which he stashed. Mike stayed outside as a lookout, making sure that they weren't walked in on by anybody. And minutes later, the robbery was done, and the teens escaped on foot. Now to them, it was the perfect crime, but the South Australian police immediately got on the case, and after taking the testimony of the injured operator, they were able to figure out the culprits responsible for the crime. Christian and one of the underage accomplices were quickly arrested, and the other one was also arrested shortly after. Now because 2 of the suspects were too young, prosecuting them wasn't easy. But one fact that helped the prosecutors was that Christian confessed to the crime. He also admitted to alcohol and drug abuse and said that he felt compelled to rob the store because of GTA. Now this confession made the case open and shut for the prosecution, but ironically it was also Christian's defense. When the case went to court, Christian's defense lawyer told Judge Paul Rice that not only should Christian and his friends be pardoned because this was a first-timer offense, but also because they were influenced by GTA. Basically, the defense blamed GTA for being a violent game instead of the teens for committing a violent crime. Now by this time, the case had not only made local headlines, but was national news. This eventually led to stores across Australia banning the sale of GTA games altogether, while studies were being conducted to research how violent games like GTA could affect real-life crimes, especially in teens and young adults. But the true ending was yet to come, as the courts had to determine if the defense presented was good enough to save Christian, Trevor and Mike. And on April 30th, 2014, the court gave its judgment. As the oldest of the trio, the only adult, Christian got the most serious sentence, 4 years and 11 months in prison, 2 years of which was required before he could apply for parole. And the judge rejected the influence defense, saying as he sentenced him, "On your version of the facts, your memory of what happened was extremely disjointed. In your alcoholic stubber, you tried to emulate or replicate the game in real life and robbed a service station. The reality is that you are now in jail." Now Trevor and Mike got much lesser sentences. Because of Trevor's attack on the operator with the knife, he was sentenced to a month in a juvenile detention center, while Mike avoided jail time altogether, instead getting a suspended sentence with behavioral conditions. This means that if he went out of line in any way, he'd immediately go to prison. Now as bad as this case was, at least the victim of this attack only had minor injuries. The victim in the next case wasn't so lucky.
We begin with a bizarre murder out of East Feliciana Parish. Detectives say an 8-year-old boy shot his caregiver in the back of the head.
On August 15, 2013, in Slaughter, a small town in East Feliciana Parish, Louisiana, a call was placed from the home of a 87-year-old Marie Smothers, claiming that someone had been shot. However, when police officers showed up, this seemed to be false. The only people in her house were Marie and her 8-year-old grandson, who she was taking care of. Both of them were fine. However, exactly a week later, on August 22nd, they received another call, and this time when they showed up, they walked in on something they weren't prepared for. Marie's grandson, let's call him Mark, had been living with her while his parents went to school. Mark and his grandma had a great relationship, and apparently even slept in the same room. Now from the outside looking in, this seemed like a happy family. However, there were two things about this happy little family that would come back to haunt them. You see, Marie, like a lot of Americans in the South, had a handgun. Marie had kept a .38 caliber gun for home defense. Unfortunately, this gun wasn't secured, and Mark could easily access it. The second problem was that Mark had a PlayStation 3 console, and at the time, he had started playing GTA 4. Now, GTA 4 isn't the kind of game an 8-year-old should be playing at all. In fact, it's rated mature 17+ by ESRB, the body responsible for rating all forms of electronic media. This means that Mark was 9 years too young to be playing it, and his actions would soon show exactly why. At around 5 PM on August 22nd, 2013, after a GTA 4 gaming session, Mark located his grandmother's handgun, walked up behind her as she watched TV in the living room, and shot her in the back of the head. Now cops were called and rushed to the scene to find Mark with a gun and his now deceased grandmother, but the insanity is nowhere close to an end. Under Louisiana law, children under the age of 10 cannot be arrested or charged with any crime. This means that even though Mark had just taken his grandma's life, he couldn't be arrested for it and had to be handed over to his parents that very evening. Now news of the shooting went viral almost immediately, and it came as a shock to many people within the community.
Surprising, shocked. And it was like right behind you and don't know anything about it.
Even the owner of the trailer park where Marie lived had something to say about it.
It's a shock to me as much as it is anyone else, you know, because everything's been so peaceful.
Now the case didn't only get local attention, it went national. Because this incident came just 8 months after the Sandy Hook shooting, when 20-year-old Adam Lanza shot and killed 26 people, there was a lot of buzz about gun safety. And now in Mark's case, it also involved a video game. Now there was also a lot of talk about how violent games like GTA could get people to commit heinous crimes. People took to the internet to vent. Grandma kept a loaded handgun when the 8-year-old could find it, but the blame is placed on video games. And you're right, GTA is not a game that an 8-year-old should be playing. And the game has an 18 rating. If the kid is playing it, the first thoughts have to be, why didn't the parents stop him? And amid all this, people still wondered if Mark knew what he was doing when he picked up that gun, and if he should be held liable. Now while Mark insisted that the shooting was an accident, investigators believed that his actions were intentional, given that Marie was directly shot in the head while watching TV. They also announced their investigation on the 911 call placed 1 week before the shooting to see if it was connected to the crime. Now on August 26, 4 days after the shooting, Judge William Carmichael ruled that Mark couldn't be held liable for his actions. He also ruled that Mark had to be returned to the custody of his parents. And District Attorney Samuel Dakila would later say, I guess they may be able to supervise it better than a 90-year-old. Now due to the psychological stress the situation had on Mark, he was also instructed to get compulsory counseling by the Families in Need of Services program, a scheme which was run by the Louisiana Office of Juvenile Justice. Now Mark and his parents have not been heard of again since the ruling, and no update was made whether or not the previous 911 call was connected, and whether his actions were influenced by GTA or if he intentionally pulled the trigger will forever be up to debate. Now as tragic as the story is, just 34 miles away from East Feliciana Parish, another crime would soon be committed by a man who thought of himself as a real-life GTA Online troll.
Shocking story, a college student trying to play out one of the world's most popular and violent video games in real life. The young man stole a car and went on a spree straight out of Grand Theft Auto.
It was 2 AM on September 21st, 2013, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Zachary Burgess, a 20-year-old freshman at Auburn University, was about to make the biggest mistake of his entire life. Zach should have been, by almost every metric, on top of the world. He was from Hoover, Alabama, a wealthy suburb of Birmingham, known for strong high school athletics and academic programs, which he definitely benefited from. He was a semi-pro lacrosse player, playing midfield for Auburn's Men's Collegiate Lacrosse Association Division I team. In fact, he was in Baton Rouge for a game against rival team LSU Tigers. So when he jumped into an idling truck that definitely wasn't his and sped off with an unwilling screaming passenger, it was completely out of character for him. And what was worse was the trail of destruction he left in his wake, leaving people wondering what had gone so wrong to make the star lacrosse player snap. Just 4 days before Zach's rampage, GTA 5 had just been released. Zach was one of the gamers who bought the game, but unlike most people playing GTA 5, he wanted a piece of that action in real life. And the opportunity to live out his fantasies would present itself when his team traveled to Louisiana for a road game against one of their strongest rivals. It was a night many people still remember for all the wrong reasons. Tigerland is a popular nightlife spot on Bob Pettit Boulevard, close to the LSU campus, and because of its concentration of college bars, is a place where LSU students would hang out and make new friends. So when LSU students Dalton McLean and his friend Monique Giarosso showed up to Tigerland, they had no idea that they were in for the wildest nights of their lives. Now Dalton stepped out of his 2006 gray Chevrolet Silverado just outside Fred's Bar, one of the college bars on Tigerland. He left the truck running with Monique in the passenger seat, and Zach, who was nearby, noticed this and decided to jump right into the driver's seat, ready for a joyride. At first, Monique thought he was a friend of Dalton's, but when she tried to speak to him, he completely ignored her, and she would later recall,
"He wouldn't speak to me, he wouldn't look at me, and it was like he was just in the zone."
To her surprise, Zach took off, driving erratically through the parking lot. His driving was beyond reckless. In fact, a police report would later say,
"He fled the scene of the accidents with no signs of him intending to return the truck to the rightful owner."
Now, as he drove, he hit multiple vehicles in the parking lot, damaging them. At some point, he slowed down a bit after hitting a car. Monique, who feared for her life, jumped out of the truck while it was still moving. And by the time Zach had reached the fence of Tigerland, he'd hit 9 vehicles in total. Now, word got to Dalton that his truck had been stolen, and he ran back outside just in time to see Zach smash through the fence, strike a Chevrolet Tahoe, and then crash a Silverado at high speed into a brick wall. He later recalled,
"I sprinted out there, just watched him get caught up in the brick wall here, spinning the tires. I had no idea what to think about it at that point. I was just freaking out. It was just insane."
Zach ran out of the truck, hoping to make a clean escape, but Dalton caught up to him, detaining him until Baton Rouge Police Department officers arrived and placed him under arrest. Now at first, detectives thought that Zach's spree must have been a boost-up run, but when they investigated, it turned out that Zach wasn't under the influence of alcohol or any other drug. It was all done sober. He insisted that his only justification for his actions was GTA. He apparently
wanted to see what it was really like to play the video game Grand Theft Auto.
Now it took 4 days from the launch of GTA 5 for Zach to decide to try it out in the real world. But since the video game made me do it wasn't a valid defense in court, Zach was charged with vehicle theft, kidnapping, and 9 counts of hit and run. Now Zach was bailed out after paying a $40,000 bond, and 2 years and 2 months after the incident, on November 24th, 2015, he appeared before Judge Trudy White. He'd made a plea deal with prosecutors where he pleaded guilty to just 1 count of false endangerment and 1 consolidated count of hit and run. Both charges were misdemeanors, which spared him from jail time. Judge Trudy accepted the plea and sentenced Zach to 6 months of probation, $210 in court costs, and 50 hours of community service. But while Zach's GTA-inspired rampage didn't have any casualties, this next case unfortunately does, and it proves how mental health plays a driving force for some of the worst crimes.
William and Josh Buckner, 2 stepbrothers between the ages of 14 and 16, back in June 2003, took to the highway with a shotgun and started opening fire upon vehicles.
On June 25, 2003, 16-year-old William Russell Buckner and 14-year-old Joshua Thomas Buckner from Newport, Tennessee snuck 2 .22 caliber rifles from their parents' unlocked bedroom closet. At around 8 p.m., they positioned themselves in the woods on the north side of Interstate 40, near the Newport exit, and aimed right at oncoming traffic. They were about to complete a real-life rampage mission, one that would change the course of their lives permanently. Will and Josh had always been a little different. Will, the older of the two, was born prematurely in 1987. A month after his birth, he suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which greatly affected his intellect and left him with an IQ of around 91. His half-brother, Josh, was born 2 years later. Josh suffered from ADHD, which made learning a little difficult for him. And then, at 11 years old, he suffered a tragic loss. His mother, Sandy, died of congestive heart failure, which led to him getting depressed and failing 7th grade. Now, the Buckner brothers' life wasn't easy, and that would lead to them lashing out at the world in the most violent way possible. Will and Josh had been fans of GTA 3. The game had an optional series of events called Rampage Missions that players needed to finish to get a 100% completion on the game. Now these missions require players to kill a set number of people within 2 minutes, and Will and Josh got the weird idea to try this out in real life. So that evening on June 25, 2003, they aimed their guns expecting to commit a slaughter. They fired 12 rounds into the vehicles that passed by. In one of these vehicles, a red Toyota truck, was 45-year-old Aaron Hamill. Aaron was a registered nurse from Knoxville who was returning from a hiking trip in Black Mountain, North Carolina, with his cousin Denise Deneau. One of the bullets shot by the teens went through the windshield and straight into Aaron's head. Denise got sprayed with the glass and blood, but somehow managed to remain unhurt. Still, the assault was far from over. Just seconds after Aaron was shot, another car, a white Mazda, was also hit. The car was being driven by David Hackman, with his girlfriend, 19-year-old Kimberly Bidet, in the passenger seat. A bullet went through the passenger side window and hit Kimberly in the hip, instantly shattering her pelvis. She was seriously hurt, but survived. Aaron, on the other hand, was not so lucky. After multiple people made 911 calls, the Cobb County Police Department rushed to the scene. They found the boys with spotlights and heat sensors and promptly arrested them. Kimberly was taken to the hospital where she underwent extensive treatment and surgeries that left her with insomnia and unable to work. In custody, the boys first lied that they'd simply been shooting at birds, before finally admitting that they were imitating GTA 3. This led to them being charged for reckless homicide and aggravated assault. However, it was pretty obvious that because the brothers were teens, they couldn't be held to the same standards as adults when it came to liability. Still, they had to answer for their actions. During their trial in August of the same year, Kimberly's testament against the boys was direct and damning.
I have 8 bullet fragments all in my body. The bullet entered my hip and I'm still receiving medical treatment.
Aaron's mother also testified, as did Denise. Denise surprisingly insisted the boys could be rehabilitated. The final statements came from the boys, and they would be a determining factor in the case. Will and Josh, who had already pleaded guilty to the charges against them, expressed regrets for their actions. Will would take the stand and say,
I will always hate myself for what happened. If I could give my life to bring him back, I gladly would. I know what I did was stupid. I didn't think anyone would get hurt. I am so sorry. And no matter how long the judge gives me, it won't be long enough because I will still hate myself.
Josh also admitted his fault and expressed that he knew the pain he'd caused.
I am sorry. I hate that it happened. I know what it's like to lose someone because I lost my mother when I was 11. And it has been hard without her.
On August 3, 2003, Judge Ben Strand delivered his judgment. The brothers were separated and placed in different juvenile facilities where they would stay until they were 19 years old. Up until their release, they would not be allowed to keep any form of contact with each other. Considering the fact that they originally faced up to 12 years in prison, this was a best case outcome. However, there was still more to come from this case, since, like with the other cases, fingers were pointed right at Rockstar. On October 20th, 2003, the families of Aaron and Kimberly brought a lawsuit up against Rockstar Games, Take-Two, Sony Entertainment, and Walmart for $246 million. They blamed the first 3 companies for helping inspire the crimes that Will and Josh committed. Walmart, on the other hand, was accused of allowing minors to buy a mature-rated game. However, in early 2004, the lawsuit was dismissed because, according to the court, the idea and concepts expressed in video games are regarded as protected speech under the First Amendment. It was a close call for Rockstar, as it would have allowed a wave of lawsuits against the company. In 2006, Will was released from juvenile custody, but 2 years later, he was arrested in Gray, Tennessee for aggravated robbery. Apart from a brief encounter with the police in 2022, Josh seemed to have stayed clean and has no record of criminal activity since the incident. Now, the Buckner brothers may have ended their life while trying to replicate things they'd seen in a GTA game, but halfway across the world and half a decade later, another teen had a similar idea, and this time he was a little more hands-on.
So in 2008, there was an 18-year-old by the name of Paul Watchino who was arrested in Thailand for stabbing a 54-year-old taxi driver.
Kwan Pokang was a taxi driver in Bangkok, Thailand's capital. He was a 54-year-old man from Maha Sarakam who had relocated to try to make a better life and care for his family. On August 2, 2008, an 18-year-old high school student named Paula Watchino flagged him down and got into his cab. Kwan had no idea at the time, but he'd been carefully selected by Paula Watt, and he was about to be a victim of one of the most brutal video game-inspired crimes of all time. Now, Paula Watt was born to an average middle-class family of civil servants. He had no history of behavioral problems, criminal action, or anything like that. Essentially, he was an average teen, but all that would change after the release of GTA 4 on April 29, 2008. Paula Watt fell in love with the game, playing it obsessively, and because his parents couldn't get him a console, he had to play it at a local arcade. Every day he'd spend all his allowance, which was around 100 baht, or just over $3, playing the game. But even that wasn't enough. He began asking his parents for more money, and would later admit that,
I needed money to play the game every day. My parents give me only 100 baht a day, which is not enough.
In just a few weeks, this need to live and breathe GTA 4 would turn dark and end in a brutal crime. On August 2, 2008, Paula Watt's mother wanted to please her son and gave him 500 baht. That's about $15, 5 times his usual allowance. However, rather than make a beeline for the arcade to play some more GTA 4, Paul Watt had something else on his mind. He walked into a Lotus store and bought 2 knives. And after that, he went out to look for a cab. Since GTA 4's Liberty City is a parody of New York, it had a lot of taxis like the real-life city. In the game, these taxis, like almost every other vehicle in Liberty City, could be carjacked, and Paul Watt had done this multiple times in the game, and now he wanted to try it out in real life. On his first try, he got cold feet because there were too many witnesses around. However, when Kuan showed up, he made up his mind to commit. For one, Kuan was older, and he believed he wasn't going to put up much of a fight. He'd also figured out a way to avoid witnesses, and that's by getting Kuan to drive to an isolated place. He gave the directions. Now, all he had to do was wait. When they arrived at the isolated street, Paul Watt sprang into action. He pulled one of the knives he'd gotten, put it to Kuan's neck, and demanded money. But Kuan had no plans to get robbed, so he resisted. He pulled out an iron bar that he'd kept under a seat and fought back. However, Paul Watt slashed repeatedly with the knife and stabbed Kuan over 10 times in the throat. In a bid to escape, Paul Watt got into the driver's seat and attempted to flee. However, there was one small issue. He couldn't drive. He struggled to control the car, using the horn excessively and crashing into another car. Eventually, the police got called, and as they arrived, they expected to see a drunk driver, only to instead find a dead cab driver with his murderer unsuccessfully trying to escape in his cab. Perhaps the only thing more disturbing than Paul Watt's actions were his responses when asked what his motivations were. In his words, he
wanted to find out if it was easy in real life to rob a taxi as it was in the game,
and
killing seemed easy in the game.
Now, he was immediately charged with possession of a deadly weapon and robbery causing death. In Thailand, these charges are punishable by death or life imprisonment. And as news of the incident spread, so did the public perception about GTA. People started to link it to other GTA-inspired crimes in the US, and the Thai government took notice. The director of the Thai Ministry of Culture Surveillance Center went public with a warning.
This time bomb has already exploded, and the situation could get worse. Today it is a cab driver, but tomorrow it could be a video game shop owner.
2 days after the incident, New Era Interactive Media, the only distributor of GTA in Thailand, pulled the game from more stores, saying,
"We're sending out requests to outlets and shops to pull the games off their shelves, and we will replace them with other games."
Just 2 days later, the police had executed a full ban on GTA games. Anyone found selling the game faced 3 to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $3,000. Gamers weren't quiet about it either, with most defending GTA.
If Grand Theft Auto played such a huge part in the crime, shouldn't the kid be let off without penalty? It's strange, people call violent video games such a big cause of violence in a society. Yet those who commit these crimes would never get off by saying, the game did it. Well, he used a knife. Ban knives. He also admitted he did it so he could get money. Ban money.
With someone else sarcastically replying,
"You guys are completely missing the point. Banning knives and money? Don't be stupid. That won't solve anything. Ban taxi drivers."
But not everyone was on GTA's side.
I personally find GTA horrible and boring. I'm sick of violence and killing in my own country. I don't blame GTA. The human society is sick. So there are sick game developers and sick teenagers. There's no end to this.
Meanwhile, Paul Watt claimed that he'd not meant to kill Kuan and only wanted to rob him, but there's no record of whether this was successfully argued in court. Paul Watt was 18 when he stabbed Kuan to death. Under Thai law, he was old enough to face execution, but no public record of his sentence was ever released. He simply disappeared into the system. In contrast, the fate of this next case was clear and tragic.
New at 11, the man accused of leading a chase across 5 counties is in court.
Ryle Cole Stone had a long criminal history. Born in 1986, he'd been at odds with the authorities since 2003, when he was 17. In fact, he'd been arrested or imprisoned almost every year since 2003. The charges against him included assault, receiving stolen property, weapons possession, criminal mischief, driving under the influence, driving without a license, motor vehicle theft, assault of a custody officer, and a host of drug-related offenses. So on March 12, 2014, when he spotted a red Ford Edge idling in the parking lot of a convenience store in Boulder County, Colorado, it was clear that something was about to go down. Just 6 months earlier, in October 2013, Ryan had just been released after a 4-year stint for drug-related offenses. However, it only took him 4 months to get in trouble again. In February 2014, he was arrested for possessing crystal meth, but was released on a $25,000 bond. Cops still believed he was not just using, but also possibly dealing, so they watched his house constantly. And after missing a court hearing and walking out of another, multiple arrest warrants were issued on him. He was considered extremely unstable, and for the next month, he successfully evaded the police. On the morning of March 12, 2014, while still on the run, Ryan went to the Longmont Fire Department and asked one of the firefighters to drive him to a homeless shelter. Halfway through though, he changed his mind and instead asked to be dropped off at Bradley's, a convenience store in Longmont, Boulder County. He went into the store and got a cup of coffee. Now as Ryan was enjoying his coffee, Martha Rodriguez pulled into Bradley's in her red Ford Edge. Her 4-year-old son Alan was in the back seat, strapped in. Her plan was to make a quick coffee stop, so she left the keys in the ignition and rushed into the store, with Alan still strapped in. Now Ryan noticed this and immediately rushed to the car, got in the driver's seat and zoomed off. Moments later, Martha noticed what had happened and immediately called 911 around 6:39 a.m. An Amber Alert was placed for Alan, and a "Be on the lookout" was issued for Ryan and the car. Not long after, a Colorado State Patrol trooper spotted Ryan in the stolen red Ford Edge on Interstate 25, and a high-speed chase began. In no time, multiple police cruisers and even news helicopters had joined in on the pursuit.
Into the grass, over the curb there, and he can see there's no restrictions right through the little fence and then down the embankment and onto I-76. So that's how he was able to escape the side street.
In his attempt to shake the tail that he had, Ryan swerved, drove into incoming traffic, and raced down the highway, reaching speeds of up to 100 miles per hour. Now at 7:39 a.m., Ryan crashed into a 2011 tan Kia minivan. He then exited the Ford and ran to the Kia, which was being driven by an unnamed teenage driver. He hijacked the Kia and then sped off again. Thankfully, Alan was left in the now abandoned Ford. He was shaken up but otherwise unharmed. Ryan continued on the I-76 and didn't let up. Minutes later, at 8:02 a.m., Ryan approached Colorado State Trooper Belloman He, who was waiting further down the highway, to drop spike strips and hopefully bring the car to a stop. Now Ryan noticed this and dodged to avoid the strips, but he swerved directly into the trooper at 96 miles per hour. The impact was severe, instantly breaking Belloman's neck in over 20 places. Still, Ryan didn't slow down. He kept driving recklessly and hitting vehicles. When he rammed a silver Toyota sedan being driven by Zune Wharton, Zune pulled over, thinking it was a regular accident. Ryan, however, ran to the door, hijacked the car, and continued the chase. As Ryan reached the intersection of Peoria Street and Lincoln Avenue, he tried to run a red light, but instead T-boned a silver 2008 Camry driven by Stacy Radar and another vehicle. The crash was so bad that Stacy would later testify,
"I was crying. I didn't know if I was going to die or if I was hurt. I didn't know. I was just spinning."
The Toyota he was driving was wrecked, and so he exited that as well and continued the chase on foot. After trying and failing to scale a 6-foot fence, he finally gave up and surrendered to the encircling Douglas County Sheriff's Office deputies. Now the police officers suspected that the spree was done under the influence of drugs, and they were correct. When Ryan was taken to the hospital and tested, doctors found traces of meth, marijuana, and diazepam in his blood. And after being treated at the hospital, Ryan was then taken to the police station, where he was formally charged with 26 counts, including attempted first-degree murder, robbery, kidnapping, vehicular assault, and endangerment of a minor. These charges apparently meant nothing to Ryan. In prison, Ryan showed no remorse, and instead he bragged about the chase, not as a desperate escape attempt, but as something he'd been planning to do. According to a prosecutor,
he bragged about mimicking a video game. On our roads, he put himself above the safety of everyone. Men, women, and children.
Ryan even went as far as to mock the patrolman he'd hit in recorded phone calls. But when these were presented during his trial, he suddenly had a change of heart and apologized to the court for his actions, saying,
"I pray the victims in this case can find it in their heart to forgive me, because right now, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't feel horrible for that March morning. I'm so sorry for any and all anguish I've caused anyone."
But the jury didn't buy it, and in October 2015, they found him guilty on 18 counts, sentencing him to 160 years in prison. The earliest possible date of release for Ryan is 2090, making it essentially a life sentence. He's not been heard of again since his sentencing. But as crazy as Ryan's spree was, it's nothing compared to the next case, which sounded like it might have come right out of a GTA game.
In 2014, rumors began spreading of a vicious gang working the M4 highway south of Moscow.
The M4 highway is one of Russia's most important highways, but from 2012 to 2014, it was also one of the deadliest. Robberies, assaults, and murders became common, and there was just one group responsible for it. It all started with a man named Ibaidolo Subganov. In 2004, Ibaidolo moved from Kyrgyzstan to Russia under the name Ramstam Usmanov. For the next 7 years, he lived in Moscow and worked low-wage jobs. In 2011, something in him snapped though, and he became radicalized into Islamic extremism. He traveled to Syria, joined the militant group ISIL, and fought during the Syrian civil war. By the time he returned to Russia, a plan was already forming: bring together the desperate and the displaced, arm them with extremist purposes, and take the M4. Ibaidolo targeted people like him for recruitment. Poor Central Asian labor migrants, mostly from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. He promised them money, housing, and assistance with documentation. And it didn't take long before he filled out the ranks of the group. One of the new members was his brother, Kolik, who became a key part of the group. Now, before the group started to operate, he also radicalized them into the extremist ideology, training them to be future fighters for ISIL. There was just one final step for them to prove their loyalty to the cause: robbing and terminating the infidels as they drove on the M4. The first known victim of the gang was an Uzbek taxi driver named Bahram Barov. On March 7, 2012, Bahram and his cab went missing. However, the gang was later spotted using his cab, while Bahram was still not found. 4 months later, on July 22, 2012, a Lithuanian man, Firuz Karakulov, was targeted, and his car was also stolen. For a while, the gang operated slowly, and attacks were rare. However, things would soon take a drastic turn as the group got more violent. On June 11, 2013, auto mechanic Andrei Zoryan and saleswoman Julia Baronova were ambushed by the gang on the M4. Both of them were shot, but Julia survived by pretending to be dead and then calling her friends when the coast was clear. This marked a shift in the way the gang operated, as law enforcement later confirmed that this attack was simply a training exercise into executions rather than a robbery. Over the next few months, they would get bolder, and their attacks became more common and regular. They robbed and killed scores of people, mostly on and around the M4. Sometimes they didn't even bother to rob their victims, they just shot them. This was the case with bank founder Vladimir Kirilluk, who was shot 8 times and stabbed 25 times while bicycling. Their mode of operation also became more steady. According to the authorities, the gang was
placing spikes on roads,
forcing the motorists out of their vehicles, and shooting them dead. Because of the violent nature of their crimes, the media started to call them the GTA gang, and the name stuck. The robberies and murders went on, and because the gang never stayed in one spot for too long and attacks were isolated, it was hard for the authorities to track them down. However, one incident would change the course of the investigation into the gang and bring their downfall. On May 3, 2014, an elderly couple, Anatoly and Tatiana Lebedev, both in their 60s, were ambushed on the M4 at night and shot. They didn't survive. The gang left them there after stealing an iPad that they found on them. 4 months later, the gang tried another attack, but they failed, and the victims ran straight to the police, giving them every bit of information that they could. This info, together with the GPS data from the stolen iPad, was enough for the authorities to finally track them down to a villa in Udelnaya. On November 6, 2014, at around 3 AM, the police and federal officers carried out a raid on the hideout. They expected resistance, and they got that from Ibaidolo, who threw a grenade at the officers while yelling Allahu Akbar. He was immediately shot down by a sniper. 9 members of the gang were arrested that night and got charged for a long list of crimes. Now, the raid was considered such a success that even Russian President Vladimir Putin personally praised the operation. Other members were tracked down, arrested, and prosecuted as well. It seemed like the case was all over and done, but what came next was perhaps the most daring thing the group ever tried. On August 1st, 2017, almost 3 years after the raid, 5 members of the GTA gang were at the Moscow Regional Court for their trial, when they somehow managed to disarm the 2 guards transporting them. They then took their weapons and attempted to shoot their way out of the courthouse. However, security at the courthouse returned fire, gunning down 3 of them and injuring the remaining 2. One of the suspects shot down was Kolik, Ibaidolo's brother. A year later, on August 9, 2018, the court finally reached a verdict after 115 trial hearings. 4 members of the gang, Umar Kazanov, Sherodston Kodirov, Hatsaraton Dorokonov, and Anvar Ulukmuradov were sentenced to life in prison, while another member, Sofarjan Gulyamov, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, the GTA gang remains one of the most infamous groups in modern Russian history, and the man in the final case of this video took a page right out of their book when he was so desperate to stay out of jail that he committed more violence to ensure it.
And now it's at the center of a civil lawsuit involving the murders of 3 men in the small town of Fayette, Alabama.
Devin Moore, half-brother of NFL player Mookie Moore, is a name many people in the GTA community know, but don't like to hear. It was June 2003 in Fayette, Alabama, and Devin was fresh out of high school. He just enlisted in the US Air Force and was about to begin basic training. It seemed like he had his life in order and knew what he wanted to do, but this wasn't exactly the truth. Behind that plan, things at home were far from stable. His parents, Kenneth Moore and Gloria Thompson, were allegedly abusive, at least according to Devin himself. His brother Adam and his aunt Sadie Wicker backed up this accusation. They claimed that their father would beat his children for almost any reason he could think of, and put them to work for hours on end. According to Adam,
there was no love. He would treat us like workers. We were working like grown men, 16 and 17-hour shifts. We were happy when school was in, so we could get a break.
His father argued that Devin was the one with the problems. According to him,
I don't care what anyone says. Devin was a troubled kid. He carried a knife to school and harassed girls. The school records will show all this.
Now one thing was clear though, Devin Moore wasn't a happy teenager. In 2001, he began to play GTA games, especially Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City. He became obsessed with the games, playing for extended sessions at a time. Soon, this obsession would be a part of a tragedy that would affect 3 families forever. On June 7, 2003, Devin was in possession of a stolen vehicle. At around 1 AM, he drove the car into a parking lot of a convenience store and soon fell asleep at the wheel. At around 3 AM, Officer Arnold Strickland of the Fayette Police Department discovered Devin during a routine patrol and decided to investigate. He had reason to believe that the vehicle was stolen, and so Devin was arrested and taken to the station to be booked and processed. He claimed that he'd bought the car for $500 from an addict in Jasper, Alabama, but he was still charged for receiving stolen property. Throughout all this, Devin was cooperative with the police officers, which made what he did next all the more horrifying. At around 5 AM, Devin suddenly jumped at Arnold, catching him totally off guard. And before the officer could react properly, Devin managed to get a service pistol, a .4 caliber semi-automatic Glock. He then pointed it at the officer and pulled the trigger twice, with one shot aimed right at the officer's head. Arnold dropped to the floor, dead. But Devin wasn't done yet. He went on a hunt throughout the station, finding and killing Officer James Crump and 911 dispatcher Ace Mueller, the only other people in the station that night. Devin then realized that he needed to escape. He grabbed a set of car keys he found and then went to the parking lot and drove out in one of the station's cruisers. It would take another hour before the bodies were discovered and the manhunt began. Now he headed west towards the border between Alabama and Mississippi. Somehow he actually managed to get over the border before finally getting spotted in Lowndes County. Knowing that he'd been caught, he surrendered without resisting, but not without saying one of the most eerie lines ever.
Life is a video game. Everybody's got to die sometime.
This line would be quoted during his trial for capital murder. His lawyer pleaded that Devin was mentally unwell and his actions were driven by video games he played. However, considering that he'd already confessed to the crime during a 2.5 long hour interrogation with the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, this was an impossibly hard case for the defense to prove. It didn't take long for the jury to reach a verdict after the trial. In just an hour, they returned with a guilty verdict. On October 9, 2005, Devin Moore was formally sentenced to death by lethal injection. He remains on death row at Hallman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama to this day, and all his appeals have been rejected. Now Devin's case went viral, and it brought intense scrutiny to Rockstar and the GTA franchise. On March 4, 2005, 60 Minutes aired the episode Can a Video Game Lead to Murder?, centered on the Devin Moore case. Multiple papers around the country also ran with the story, and online discourse was also high. Now the families of the victims criticized the game. On February 18, 2005, before the criminal trial against Devin Moore had concluded, the families of his 3 victims filed a civil lawsuit worth $600 million against Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar Games, Sony, Walmart, and GameStop for GTA's apparent role in the loss of their loved ones. However, this ultimately failed, as the court couldn't find any solid link between the crimes and the game.